Dear Director of Admissions, Whitney Dashley, if I'm saying that correctly. Quote, each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Maya Angelou. I'm applying to the Sanford Cumberland University Juris Doctor program for fall admission. I chose this program specifically because of your competitive trial team has 9 women as representatives, and after researching the Women in Law chapter, I found it to be a strong alliance of professionally driven women who support each other in the stresses of life and law school. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I took my first step at following my dream in 2009. However, it was clear life still had much to teach me before I could truly understand, so I followed opportunity and necessity to gain more experience. As a child and well into adulthood, I was wayward and brusque. Though charming and endearing to many, it was a way for me to buck the system, rebel against etiquette and the boring ways you are taught to live. This wayward disposition garnered me an invitation into the world of sales, and it was organic to me. Speaking to people, reading them, and then anticipating their next move was as easy as breathing. And I soon earned the reputation of sales beast, an endearing term in the trade meant to identify that I was unrelenting and always had my eye on the prize. After many years of a successful career, I started noticing I wasn't acquiring actual skills. I brought my natural skills to the table, but I wasn't growing, learning, or fulfilling my original goals. I was making good money at Wells Fargo. However, what I was doing wasn't compelling. I felt like a cog in a machine. I grew up in an apartment in Manassas, Virginia, hope I'm saying that correctly, with my mother, stepfather, and brother. While our needs were met, I didn't know until later in life we weren't even considered middle class. College wasn't talked about. Actually going to the dentist wasn't even talked about. My mother did well as a woman with dyslexia and a 4th grade reading level. She worked her way up to become an executive housekeeper at a well-known hotel and still works there after 30 years. My biological father in the Navy was usually on a ship and did what he could from far away. I knew what I loved. Education was not important. What I was supposed to aspire to was marriage and a blue-collar job. It was glamorized in the country ballads we listened to then. Cursing was normal. Fried food was normal. Yelling was normal. Holes in drywall, normal. Reading was not, which I did a lot to my mother's horror. I remember the first time I was told what a lawyer was. I was 10. I came home from school and told my mother about a court case we reviewed in current events. The case was about abortion. As a completely new concept for me, I was appalled. How could someone end a baby's life? In my exasperation, I called my father in Florida and argued with him about pro-life versus pro-choice for an hour. At 10, I was told I should be a lawyer one day. At 10, I decided maybe I should. Time has changed my views towards abortion, the complexities of life, maturation, and a larger worldview has clarified my perception of women's rights in general. I am also recently a single mom, and this has clarified my perception of women's rights in general. I'm also recently a single mom, and this has further expanded my understanding about opportunity and vulnerability for women in the United States. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. This year began with me as a stay-at-home mother, married to a soldier, getting ready to move our family to Fort Stewart, Georgia. I was excited as it was our very first move. My son was 17 and my daughter had just turned 2. We all relocated and it was a tiring experience to move all our belongings 10 hours away. I was excited about what this new adventure could bring. It was nice there and I began settling in after a month or so. That's when my husband came home for lunch and told me he wanted a divorce. No fight, no discussion, no prior fighting, just it's over and I'm moving into a friend's house. You have a month to move out. I didn't cry. That's all I remember. I rallied friends, family, and set about the work of moving and the logistics it would take to get us back to Virginia where my family lived. I'm going to stop there because this is longer than it needs to be. It's longer than a typical personal statement. A personal statement should be 2 pages, double spaced, typically. And I think we have enough here that we can already start critiquing it and giving feedback. So what are some early thoughts you all have about this one?
Okay, I wrote down a couple notes here just to kind of go through. The narrative started to get a little bit choppy at the end when she started to talk about the drywall and then I was a lawyer and the pro-life choice. Just make sure that those transition words are there. They don't have to be a therefore or furthermore. They just have to flow in a cohesive way. And as well as I don't understand where the why comes in. Like how does all of those experiences, which are extremely, this person is very strong. They understand why to some extent they are applying in the beginning. They started off that way, but they never related back their experiences to that why again. And so I was looking for that and I just didn't see it. So that's something to think about.
Agreed 100%. Thank you for that. Other feedback?
I feel like there was too much going on. With everything that was said, if she would have been a little more zoned in on one specific, it was hard to follow even reading it, even having you read it. So I just think there was just a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot here. There's too much here. It's covering too many different topics in one place. It's like she feels the need to cram in her entire life story in this one statement, which you certainly don't want to do. It shouldn't even be a resume laundry list, let alone a life laundry list here. So I think there's way too many things here. I agree that, as one comment said, it should be split into two statements at least.
Yeah, there's no real, there's not like a narrative thread that you can follow through this. You know, like what I would say before you even get into the way that it's written, like the quality of the writing itself, like the content needs to be more well established before you even get to that point. Like I honestly would probably scrap the whole thing and just zero in on like what's the one key thing, or what's the change, like what's the main story point that you want to emphasize in the personal statement.
Yeah, pick one thing and focus on it. And there's some questions here around the abortion comment, whether the author should lead with abortion, or maybe if that's not the why, maybe remove it altogether. If abortion's super important to you, you could talk about it, but otherwise I would probably aim to stay away from really hot button controversial topics like that if it's not going to add a whole lot. So things like abortion, affirmative action, Israel versus Palestine. If that's your number one passion topic, then by all means pick it, and the schools that will punish you for it, you probably don't want to go there anyway, whichever side you choose. But otherwise, if it's not really core to it, I wouldn't throw it in there as an aside. And being someone at the age of 10 who loves to argue is not a great reason to go to law school, whether abortion's the debate topic or not. Either way, who you are at 10 doesn't mean you should be a lawyer.
Yeah, also, oh, sorry. Does someone else want to say something?
It's fine. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Can we talk about the sales beast comment just really quick?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, I do know that this is probably a term and she does explain that, but is that necessary? I know she's trying to convey, possibly, I'm just assuming here, that this is something that, she's done well in the sales industry, but is it worth diving in so deep where it's talking about the specifics and then, calling yourself a sales beast? How does that look in terms of, the admissions process?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think it may, that term, which I'm certainly not familiar with either, although I get what she's getting at there based on the context. If it's going to confuse a little bit, even for a moment, it pulls you out of the flow. So I wouldn't focus on that. If you alternatively want to have a statement focused on what you learned from working in sales and the people skills there, you could highlight that through an anecdote and make that the focus of a personal statement. Or I see some things here related to family, like having kids, getting divorced, being a single mom. That could be a great topic, perhaps, for a diversity statement. That could be a separate bucket to place that particular topic in, to allow one to focus on that and go deeper on it.
I wonder if it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, she started talking about the female trial team. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm wondering if it's a good idea. It seems like she's a little bit condescending towards like country music and fried food, which aren't necessarily my cup of tea, but I don't know if they're the admissions officer's cup of tea. I wouldn't want to like put them I wouldn't want to sound that way to someone.
That's a good point. Yeah, you don't want to unnecessarily potentially alienate someone without a good reason to do so. I wouldn't assume too much about the person reading your application. They're automatically going to agree with your worldview. You don't know who they are, and that could rub them the wrong way potentially, certainly.
I also think the paragraph where she mentions about like she's 10 and then how she doesn't have that concept, and then all of a sudden she starts talking about how she was on a call with her dad about, pro and praise. I mean, that might add confusion to certain people who are reading about, or she's saying she doesn't know, but then she's talking about it at the same time. So what do you think about that?
I'm guessing that abortion probably doesn't need to be in this personal statement at all. It seems like it's thrown in as an aside as a particular example to say that because she was 10 and liked arguing, that was the beginning of her legal career. I think it's unnecessary. I would probably remove that altogether.
The intro also to the after the quote, the third paragraph, as a child and well into adulthood, I was wayward and brusque. Those like first two sentences, they seem not well connected to the paragraph, or they don't seem to have much of a point. Yeah. The flow here is not smooth. It sounds like she just wanted to use those words to describe herself. But again, first of all, I would say you don't want to seem like you're bragging. You also if you want to communicate those aspects of your personality, I would show that rather than telling that directly. And so if you want to talk about your personality, maybe through the sales experience, as she later mentions, I would do that. And I don't know if we addressed this directly yet, but yeah, don't start with quotes. Never start with quotes. I'm not a fan of quotes, as I said in the previous workshop I did for my course. Anytime I see a quote, I'm going to want to take it out. Maybe if it's dialogue in a conversation that you had, maybe it could go there. But if it's just a generic quote that anybody could be using, I would remove it. Every word should be core to the story. And if it's taking up 10 words in the space of 500 or so, it's not worth mentioning.
There's also...
Sorry, just a quick note. I think like building off of that in terms of the structure of the personal statement, I don't know if everyone would agree, but I would definitely take out like the quote like you just mentioned, Steve, and also just the first two paragraphs, and maybe start with the one after that, just because it doesn't seem like it would add much to the statement the way it is. And also another thing that I noticed is that I think as I was listening to it the first time, a lot of it just seemed very abstract. There was a lot of abstract language that was being used with a few experiences sprinkled in here and there, but I was having a hard time kind of focusing on concrete parts of her life, given how they were kind of meshed with like other types of language that didn't necessarily like relate to that.
Yeah, agreed. The first two paragraphs here, I would cut those. I would probably cut the entire statement and start over, as I think Janine was saying. The first statement, I'm applying to blah, blah, blah. I chose this program because blah, blah, blah. Yeah, all of that's generic. It doesn't add anything. They already know you're applying to their JD program. They already know that you think their program is great. That's a given. Don't waste time on that. Start over. I would maybe, again, talk about a couple of potential routes to take. Sales experience, focus on that as one essay. Experience as a single mother, focus on that as a separate essay. And those could be maybe a diversity statement. And I would focus on those most likely here. And look, I'm just scanning through here to see if anything else jumps out based on personal experience. And I would start with those two most likely here, unless there's something else. We don't have this person's resume, so we don't know what else she might do with it. One quick side note here. I heard this come up in our previous Q&A as well, the idea about legal battles you might have, especially legal battles that relate to family. So legal battles over kids, legal battles related to divorce. It's very easy to feel bitter about those experiences and feel wronged, and to talk a lot about your personal battles and the injustice of whatever occurred. Be very careful about that, because it gets a little bit too personal, a little bit too raw. And if you haven't fully processed it and come to a place where you're okay with whatever the outcome is, and maybe it's not an okay outcome and you're right to feel how you feel, that's fine, but that may not be the place to have that battle on the application. So just tread very carefully in that area. Definitely have other people read it over and think about what you're trying to get across and what's the role of the statement, not just what's the right versus wrong in terms of the injustice of what may have happened. Any other feedback on this one, or should we go on to the next?
I just have a quick question before we go on.
Yeah, sure.
I know that you said to cut off the paragraph with the competitions and everything, but could she make it so that, for example, she does mention debate and the pro-life and all of that, that she says, because of my experience in debating, and I see that you guys have this strong debate club, and I have these experiences that made me a strong woman. Could she frame it in that way where it's like, it makes sense that she would want to go to the school because of the competitive trial team? because of her experiences, because she is, you know, inspired by this? Could that work?
It could. And if it ties into the topic of the personal statement, maybe as a closer, that could be mentioned. Otherwise, I might do a separate essay depending on the school, saying why that school in particular, to show that you've done the research on the nature of their programs and that to communicate how serious you are about their school in particular. But I certainly wouldn't open with that, because that's probably the most boring thing you could open with and have it still be like decent content. I would instead really get personal from the beginning. And then if you want to zoom out at the end, talking about as I debated in sales, or made arguments in sales, clearly organized arguments about the pros and cons of various options for the client. And then at the end, talk about this program, this trial team, maybe. But I would do that at the end, if anything.
Hi, Steve. I just have a quick question about the author and how she or he talked about, I guess, work experiences. And I was just wondering whether or not the resume already covers that and whether or not that's applicable in a personal statement.
Yeah, well, we don't have this person's resume here, and I haven't seen this person's resume, so I don't know exactly what the resume is covering. But I would imagine it probably covers the sales experience if that was a full-time position, at least, even a part-time position maybe. I guess the risk people run into is that they want to list everything from their resume in the personal statement, and that prevents them from going deep. Let the resume be the resume and let the personal statement be personal. And that means going deeper on ideally one particular thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.